mic's off. Are you using the lapel?
There we go. You'll regret that. You were liking it better when it was you couldn't hear me, right? Well, welcome to our Sunday or our summer series, Sunday morning summer series. We're going to be looking at the book of Judges together, and I get to do the introduction this morning. So before we begin, let's start with a prayer, please. Heavenly Father, we're always thankful for these opportunities to gather together as your children, in this case to examine your word more closely, to study it together, hopefully to come to a better understanding of it and how we can apply it to our own lives. Father, we're so thankful of your revelation to us of the things that are important to you for us to know. We pray that you'd help each of us to have a good understanding of it, to apply it in our lives, and to see the opportunities you place before us to share it with others. Be with us throughout our study. We're so thankful for your Son, his willingness to fulfill the plan that you've revealed to us. It's in his name we come to you in prayer. All right, so we're going to start with an audience participation, and I'd actually like you to participate in this. I know usually we say audience participation, but you really don't have to. But I'm really curious about something. So, first question. If you've ever raised a child or helped to raise a child, please raise your left hand and keep it up. Excellent. Oh, Harry's got a finger up. I think that counts, right? Harry's not sure. He's got a finger, not a hand. All right. Secondly, if you ever were a child, raise your right hand. All right. So, thank you. You can put them down. If you didn't raise either hand, I really want to talk to you after class because I want to know how that's possible. I was hoping you would have at least one of the two. And here's the reason I ask. Throughout even both the Old Testament and the New Testament, what is our relationship to God often described as? Father and children, right? So if you raised your left hand, you raised a child or helped to raise a child, you have that perspective. Actually, let's start with right hand. If you raised your right hand, you were a child, and you have that perspective at least from one side of that relationship, right? You saw how having a parent affected you. If you raised your left hand because, whichever hand, okay? If you raised the hand that said you were a child, thank you, Millie, by the way, or that you were a parent, then you have a perspective of the other side of that relationship, right? So you really have an advantage because if you only see a relationship from one side, you only understand how it affects one side, right? I think about things like this. As a child, did you always appreciate the rules that your parents set down? Probably not. Sometimes you didn't understand the rules, right? Or you didn't understand why the rules were necessary. Well, why can't I go play in the creek? I asked that one as a kid. Why can't I go play in the creek? Until that time I stepped and found one of those really deep holes and was in over my head all of a sudden. Well, then I understood why I wasn't supposed to go play in the creek. But as most kids, I learned that the hard way. I wouldn't believe my parents. I had to do the wrong thing to learn the lesson they wanted me to try to avoid, right? On the other hand, as kids, or not on the other hand, but as part of it, as kids, then we didn't appreciate being punished when we had broken those rules, right? Didn't seem like there was any value to being punished. Usually I learned the lesson the hard way, going over my head in the creek. I didn't need my parents punishing me for having learned a hard lesson, but they were doing the right thing. if we look at that comparison of our relationship to God as the child and the parent, is it a perfect comparison? No. But we're given that comparison because people try to explain things to us in ways we'll understand. So if somebody just tried to explain the nature of our relationship to God in its truest terms, it'd probably be beyond our ability to understand. So people are going to use things that we can comprehend. We can understand that relationship between ourselves and our parents, or ourselves and our children. So some ways it's imperfect. God knows everything about us, including those things we hide from ourselves. Parents, on the other hand, don't have that benefit. As parents, we're not mind readers. We don't see everything. I swore my mother had eyes in the back of her head, but she didn't see everything, right? If I hadn't been foolish enough to come home soaking wet from the creek that day, and I just kind of kept playing until I dried off, they might not have ever known, right? Because she wouldn't have seen it. Secondly, God always does what's best for us. Whether we like it or not, it's what's best for us. Parents do their best for us, but parents, just like us, are not perfect. They make mistakes. They maybe keep you from things that maybe it's better you experience and learn the hard lesson, right? But they're trying to protect us. They're doing what they feel is best for us. God never makes those choice errors, right, that we make as human beings. And then I wanted to point out the really different terms that we're going to use if we're that child and our parent, discovers what we've done. What's the term we use for what happens to that? I don't mean getting out the belt or the switch, but we call it punishment, don't we? But when we look at it from God's perspective and what he does for us and what we do as a parent, what do we call it? Teaching or discipline, right? And we're taught in the Bible that a good parent disciplines their child because how else will they learn right from wrong? And that's what God does too. He disciplines his children so that they'll learn right from wrong. They can be told it, but that doesn't mean it sinks in. The other thing I wanted to bring up about that relationship is if you've raised kids or you were a kid, did you learn your lesson the first time? I don't know about you, but I rarely did. Took a couple of those disciplinings to get the message through. Now I know, Harry was probably an angelic kid and never had to be taught a lesson twice. But that was not me. I had to be taught a lesson multiple times. And what we're going to discover as we go through this study this quarter is that the people of Israel had to be taught a lesson time and time and time again. Okay, they weren't quick learners. Part of the issue, too, is that this spans multiple generations. So a generation may have learned a lesson, but the next generation has to be taught the lesson as well. And their parents didn't get it through to them distinctly enough that it stuck for them. So this class will spend the summer quarter studying the book of Judges. What it will show repeatedly is that God established rules for his children, the nation of Israel, which they failed to follow. Scholars differ on the opinions of the time span that is covered in this book. So if you went through and added up all the times that it said there was a period of oppression or a period when God had punished them and they were under oppression, and he raises a judge to lead them out of that oppression, and then there's a period of peace when they're not under oppression, right? So if you added all of those up, they come to a little over 10 years, not hours, 410 years, okay? But the reality is, and what most scholars believe, is that we've got overlapping going on here. what's happening isn't on a national level, it might be more localized. So when you read of Judges, the events in this book of Judges may be occurring at overlapping times of the events in another book. So most scholars think that the time range here is probably between 200 and 300 years that this book covers. Let's see. Among God's rules were the ones that he'd given through Moses, recorded in the book of Deuteronomy. And as Moses prepared the people for the day they would take possession of the land that God had promised them, he relayed instructions that God had given to him to share with the people. If you'd like to turn back to Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 through 5. When the Lord your God brings you into the land that you're entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down the altars, and dash in pieces their pillars, and chop down their Asherim, and burn their carved images with fire. Now, if you were hearing those instructions, is there anything ambiguous in that? Do you have any doubt what God wants them to do? We struggle with this sometimes as Christians, and those who are outside the faith sometimes point to this and say, what a cruel God there is here. But there's a purpose. What did he end it with? If you don't do this, what's going to happen? These people are going to intermingle with you. They're going to lead you away from me. They're going to lead you to false gods. I'm telling you to do this to spare you misery. Because guess what? If you separate from me and go after these other gods, there will be consequences. That's what the whole book of Judges is about. That straying away, the consequences of it, the recognition of their error, and coming back to God, repeated over and over. Now, while you're still there in Deuteronomy, if you flip over to chapter 20, Moses records 2 different set of directions that God gives here. As the people are about to go in and possess this land that he's promised them, there are 2 sets of rules for what to do when they come up against people they need to fight. The first is recorded in verses 10 through 15, and it talks about what's to happen when you go up against forces that are not inside the land that you're going to possess. In other words, you may encounter people along the way who are going to get in your way, and you're going to have to make your way through that. Here are the rules. So we'll begin in verse 10. When you draw near to a city to fight against it, offer terms of peace to it. And if it responds to you peaceably and it opens to you, then all the people who are found in it shall do forced labor for you and shall serve you. But if it makes no peace with you, but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it. And when the Lord your God gives it into your hand, you shall put all that it makes to the sword, all of its males to the sword. But the women and the little ones, the livestock and everything else in the city, all of its spoil, you shall take as plunder for yourselves. And you shall enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which the Lord your God has given you. Thus you shall do to all the cities that are very far from you, which are not cities of the nations here. That's rule number 1. Come across them, offer to make peace. If they'll make peace, fine. You spend your time there, and you move on. If they don't make peace, then you're going to destroy them. You're going to destroy all the men. But you're going to keep all of the things there as things to help support the Israelite nation. The second set of rules applies to the peoples and the forces that they're going to encounter within that promised land. That's found in verses 16 through 18. But in the cities of these peoples that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance, you shall save alive nothing that breathes, but you shall devote to them to complete destruction the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded, that they may not teach you to do according to all their abominable practices they have done for their gods, and so you sin against the Lord your God. Simple, clear rules. These are just a few of the many that they had received, but simple and clear rules. I want you to keep those in mind as we read what we're going to in Judges, because it helps to explain why God reacts how he does when we read of the events that begin Judges. Verse 1 of Judges begins with the phrase, after the death of Joshua. So remember, God had led them out of Egypt, led by Moses, had brought them across, stopped the Egyptian army, and then there were some issues. They were a little hesitant to do what God had instructed them to do. They weren't so confident that it would go well, and in return for that, they're going to spend 40 years wandering around before they get to go to the promised land. Does Moses get to enter? No. He's told that he won't get to enter, and he dies before they head in. God, though, appoints a successor to Moses in the person of Joshua. Joshua leads the campaign to occupy and conquer the promised land. Do you remember an event in the wilderness? How many spies were sent to check out this new promised land? 12, yeah, one from each tribe. They were to go spy out the land and give a report. They were gone, and they come back. Do you remember what the outcome of those reports was? Sarah says bad. 10 of them said, oh yeah, it's great land. There's fields, there's livestock, it's great, plentiful water, but the people there are huge and powerful, and we're just tiny little insects next to them. Now, he's not talking about that they're 20 feet tall. What he's saying is they outnumber us. They have fortifications. We can't do this. 2 people, though, had a different opinion. Care to guess who they were? Joshua and Caleb. Think that had anything to do with why Joshua has chosen to succeed Moses? They both said, well, sure, they're bigger than us. They're fortified. So what? We have God. Who cares what they have? We have God. Nothing's going to stop us. If this is what God wants done, we'll be successful. So in typical mob rule, the opinion of the 10 outweigh the opinion of the 2, even though the 2 are the ones who are correct. And they are hesitant to go occupy the land, which is why they're forced to wander for 40 years. So I wanted to bring that up because we're going to encounter somebody here that I want to remind you of their discussion in Joshua chapter 24. This is going to be Caleb, the other person who gave a positive report. Beginning in verse 29, he says, or the conversation goes like this. After these things, Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old, and they buried him with his inheritance in Timnath-serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaish. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work of the Lord he did for Israel. So I just told you about the wrong thing from my notes here. That's okay, we're going to get to that part, hopefully, time allowing. So the people were faithful to God in general for as long as Joshua lived, and those who had come over with Joshua lived. They remembered the things that God had done for them, and they remained faithful as a people. But as that generation died out, the next generation who had not seen these things happen start to stray. The text for today points out the contrast between those who have been obedient, having a trusting faith, and those who are more easily distracted. Joshua had led the conquest of the land, and yet at the time of his death, the land had not yet been completely conquered. The people are determined to continue the work and inquire of God who should go up first. So let's read our text for today. That's Judges 1:1 through 2:5. It's long, fairly long reading. So try not to fall asleep during it. After the death of Joshua, the people of Israel inquired of the Lord, "Who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?" And the Lord said, "Judah shall go up. Behold, I have given the land into his hand." And Judah said to Simeon his brother, "Come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you." So Simeon went with them. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. They found Adoni-Bezek at Bezek and fought against him, and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adoni-Bezek fled, but they pursued him and caught him, and cut off his thumbs and big toes. And Adoni-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and their big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has repaid me. And they brought him to Jerusalem, and there he died. And the men of Judah fought against Jerusalem and captured it, and struck it with the edge of the sword, and set the city on fire. And afterward the men of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites, who lived in the hill country in the Negeb and in the lowland. And Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. Now the name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba, and they defeated Sheshai and Ahiman and Talmai. From there they went against the inhabitants of Debir. The name of Debir was formerly Kiriath Sefer. And Caleb said, "He who attacks Kiriath Sefer and captures it, I will give him Akshah, my daughter, for a wife." And Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, captured it, and he gave him Akshah, his daughter, for a wife. When she came to him, she urged him to ask her father for a field, and she dismounted from her donkey. And Caleb said to her, "What do you want?" And she said to him, "Give me a blessing. Since you have set me in the land of the Negeb, give me also springs of water." And Caleb gave her the upper springs and the lower springs. And the descendants of the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah from the city of the palms into the wilderness of Judah, which lies in the Negeb near Arad. And they went and settled with the people. And Judah went with Simeon his brother, and they defeated the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath, and devoted it to destruction. So the name of the city was called Hormah. Judah also captured Gaza with its territory, and Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. And the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country, but he could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain, because they had chariots of iron. And Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said. And he drove out from it the 3 sons of Anak, but the people of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived with the people of Benjamin in Jerusalem to this day. The house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. And the house of Joseph scouted out Bethel. Now the name of the city was formerly Luz. And the spies saw a man coming out of the city, and they said to him, "Please show us the way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you." And he showed them the way into the city, and they struck the city with the edge of the sword. But they let the man and all his family go. And the man went into the land of the Hittites and built a city and called its name Luz. That is its name to this day. Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shean and its villages, or Taanach and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Ibleam and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages, for the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. And Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, so the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalal, so the Canaanites lived among them, but became subject to forced labor. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko, or the inhabitants of Sidon, or of Ahalab, or of Akzib, or Helba, or of Aphik, or of Rahab. So the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Are you seeing a theme here? They did not drive them out. Again, back to those really clear instructions, right? Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh or the inhabitants of Beth Anan, so they lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and of Beth Anath became subject to forced labor for them. The Amorites pressed the people of Dan back into the hill country, for they did not allow them to come down into the plain. The Amorites persisted in dwelling in Mount Heres, in Aijalon, and in Shalbim, but the hand of the house of Joseph rested heavily on them, and they became subject to forced labor. And the border of the Amorites ran from the ascent of Akrabim to Selah and upward. Chapter 2, the first 5 verses. Now the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim, and he said, I brought you up from Egypt, and brought you into the land that I swore to give your fathers. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall make no covenant with the inhabitants of this land. You shall break down their altars, but you have not obeyed my voice. What is this you have done? So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become a thorn in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare to you. As soon as the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the people of Israel, the people lifted up their voices and wept, and they called the name of that place Bochim, and they sacrificed there to the Lord. So that's why I wanted to go back and look at the instructions God had given them in Deuteronomy. They were very clear. You don't let anything remain in those territories that I'm giving you. You can't see that the greatest. I was curious how well that would show up. Unfortunately, our display goes this way and the maps go this way. But it kind of shows the path. If you can see the red line, this is where the spies went up to check out the land before they had ever inhabited it. And it shows the peoples who lived in those lands. Again, that's really hard for you to read. I apologize for that. Next slide, same situation, goes the other way. But it shows you that these were the lands that were assigned to the various tribes. This is what they were to possess in the promised land. And lastly, I don't know how well you can see it, so the colors that are on here represent, you're looking at the pink and the green. So the pink represents all those areas that the Israelites successfully conquered and drove the people out of. All those areas where you see the green, that's where they got turned back. They weren't successful. One of the things that struck me as I read and prepared for this is that in verse 1 it says that they inquired of the Lord who should go up first. But it doesn't tell us how they inquired of the Lord. Moses was long gone. Joshua was gone. No successor to Joshua has been appointed. What was their method of inquiring of the Lord? Now, that seems to have been something that pleased the Lord. They asked, rather than just assuming for themselves who should go. But just one of those things that I find interesting to ask. It's a question we're not going to get an answer to. If it were really important, if it mattered, we'd have been told, right? But it's just one of those things where my mind goes and says, well, how did they ask? And who heard the answer? Judah is chosen to go first. They do something that I find both commendable and disappointing at the same time. They turn to another tribe, Simeon. I don't know how well you can see this. But if you see in the lower section that light blue, that's Judah. And then you've got Simeon in the middle of it, kind of surrounded by Judah. So it makes sense that Judah would invite Simeon to go with them. This is shared territory of sorts, shared borders, to go and fight the people that they're going to deal with. And they say, if you come and help me with my territories, I'll come and help you with yours. Okay? So commendable on one hand. Let's go work together. You help me, I'll help you. Disappointing to me in the sense that, why did they feel they needed help? Again, we're back to that same argument that Caleb and Joshua made in the wilderness. God is on our side. Doesn't matter how many people they have. Doesn't matter what military technology they have. We have God. We can defeat anyone. We can be defeated by no one as long as we're doing what God wants. So, as people, I guess we want as much company with us as we can. Right? But part of me is disappointed that they didn't just trust God to deliver them. In this early campaign, we encounter another person we should be familiar with, and that's Caleb. I mentioned him earlier. And I ask you if you remembered the connection between Caleb and Joshua. They were the two who gave the positive reports, the two that we would say were faithful to God and trusting in God. And then we have the conversation I was thinking of earlier in Joshua 14, verses 6 through 13. Then the people of Judah came to Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, struggle with some of these names, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, in Kadesh Barnea, concerning you and me." This is Caleb speaking. "I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought him word again as it was in my heart. But my brothers who went up with me made the heart of the people melt. Yet I wholly followed the Lord my God. And Moses swore on that day, saying, 'Surely the land on which your foot has trodden shall be an inheritance for you and your children forever, because you have wholly followed the Lord my God.' And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years since that time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses while Israel walked in the wilderness. And now, behold, I am this day 85 years old. I am still as strong today as I was in that day. Moses sent me. My strength now is as my strength was then for war and for going and for coming. So now give me this hill country of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard on that day how the Anakim were there with great fortified cities. It may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall drive them out, just as the Lord said." Then Joshua blessed him, and he gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, for an inheritance. So here we have that when Caleb got back and gave the good report, Moses recognized that he and Joshua were the two faithful of God who had all this trust in God, right? And promised him that the land you spied out, that's going to be yours because you had faith we could take it. Caleb reminds Joshua of this at the time when they're dividing up the lands, and Joshua agrees. This is what Moses said, and you were promised. This is the land you'll have. That's interesting. There's an alarm on this watch up here. Not my watch. All right. So what really strikes me out of this, did any of you catch Caleb's age here? 85. I'm 61, and I can't imagine leading people into a battle, let alone another 24 years down the road. And yet, no question in his mind, I can do this. And he goes on to say, not only am I capable of doing this, but I am as strong and as vigorous as I was the day I made that first journey to spy out the land. God has kept me this way for a purpose. And that purpose is to fulfill what I said at the time. If we trust in God, we will be victorious. If I'm Joshua, I'm thrilled. I've got a man who's a great example to everybody else around here. Trust in God and you're going to be successful. And he grants him the territory. Early in this count, we get introduced to Othniel. He is Caleb's nephew. As they're about to try to take Hebron, what does Caleb promise? Apparently the battle's going pretty intense battle, right? Or you wouldn't offer something like this up. But what does Caleb promise to the person who leads and successfully takes Hebron? His daughter, yeah. Now, keep in mind it was not as unusual, not terribly unusual at this time that cousins married. So, Othniel is his nephew, his brother's son, and he's going to marry him to his daughter. But that wasn't uncommon at all at this time. Othniel steps up and says, I'll do it. Do you think that he saw the leadership that Caleb had, the trust in God that Caleb had, and that affected his decision? That I trust in God too. If this is what God wants done, we'll be successful. No one can stand in our way. So he does indeed lead the battle, is successful, takes Hebron, and gets Caleb's daughter as a wife. There's some discussion about what specific land they should get that follows that. And if you didn't know it, if you haven't looked ahead, you're going to learn more about Othniel next week. He's your topic for Judges next week. The remaining accounts of chapter 1 outline the successes and failures of the Israelites as they attempt to accomplish the task they've been given by God to drive the rest of the people out. Judah and Simeon initially see great success. Their early battles, they're very successful at defeating all of the Canaanites and Perizzites until they reach the plains. And it says that they're unable to defeat the people who possess iron chariots. Now, keep in mind, iron chariots, they're an advantage at this time in fairly flat land. What Judah and Simeon initially took was the hill country. And chariots don't give you nearly the advantage in the hill country that they do on the plains. So people didn't even use them militarily in the hill country. But it says that they couldn't beat them because they had chariots. And I know Bill has talked about this in recent lessons and sermons, but the chariots of this day would be like the tanks of our day, right? Imposing things. But I still find this interesting that they failed at this because of some technology. Did their trust in God waver here? Were they ever going to be successful in any of this because they were such a mighty, powerful, and great nation of Israel? No. Their success all along depended on God. So it's interesting to me what happened here that God didn't intervene and just wipe out these chariots. Something must have happened. We're not told what. We're not even told anything did happen. But it seems like something must have happened that God chose not to simply wipe out the chariots and say, okay, now you're on equal ground. Go take care of it. So then we go on to see the remainder of the chapter as a record of very limited successes mixed with a lot of disappointments. They weren't successful in eliminating peoples in most cases, and instead decided to let them remain and be forced labor, which was never part of God's plan. The big takeaway I get from all this is the people of Israel had become kind of comfortable in what they had, right? We're in this new land we're promised. Okay, we'll fight these people, but if they're willing to do the work, we'll let them stick around. That would be nice if we had people to do all the stuff we don't want to have to do. They were getting comfortable. And what happens when we get comfortable? We get complacent. And when we get complacent, we fail to follow through on things. So my question is that an issue that's limited to just the people we read about here in Judges? Does that affect us too? If we get comfortable where we are, do we get complacent too? I'd say we do. That's a tendency, something we always have to watch out for and be careful about, right? If we're comfortable that I'm a good Christian, I can cut back on my reading, my studying. I can miss a service now and then. Oh, what can Bill teach me I don't already know in Bible class, right? Or what can Kurt teach me that I don't already know? So, okay, I'll sleep in today. We get comfortable at who we are, and we get complacent. And when we get complacent, we get weak. Because you're either getting better or you're getting worse. There's no standing still. This applies to us every bit as much as it did to them. We need to remain vigilant. We need to remain focused on the task ahead of us and work toward it. Chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. I've got 2 minutes to cover that. Delivers God's appraisal of their efforts, let's say. This is kind of like being called into the boss's office and talking about how you've been doing at work, right? It's not a good report. Don't think they're going to get any bonuses. In several passages in Exodus and in Deuteronomy, the people had agreed to the rules that God had set forth. And he told them as long as they remained faithful to those rules, he would be with them, he would protect them, he would ensure their success. And yet, here we see they have failed to follow those rules. God had told them, he had warned them, turn away from these duties, turn away from your agreements, abandon the covenant, and you break it. I'm not turning away from you. You will have broken this covenant, this agreement. God had promised that if they were faithful in their duties to utterly destroy the inhabitants, he would ensure their victory and success. They had failed in this, and the angel of the Lord informs them that God will not do for them what he has equipped them to do for themselves. As a result, they're told in verse 3, so now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they shall become thorns in your side, and their gods shall be a snare to you. And that sets up the remainder of the book of Judges. A cycle of obedience, comfort, complacence, failure, discipline. After a period of discipline, a leader is brought up who will lead them out of that discipline. They enjoy a period of peace and faithfulness to God, and the cycle starts all over again. And that's what the rest of this book will be about, and the rest of your lessons. So I encourage you to read ahead. Be prepared for what your teachers are going to talk to you about. Ask them lots of questions. I love it when people ask me questions and it takes me to what I was going to do 3 pages later. And then I get there and say, we already talked about this. So that's a good thing when people have kind of the same questions that I had as I read this material, and we can talk about it. So thank you for your attention, and prepare for next week, I guess.